Welcome to another episode of Love, Growth, and Narratives. I'm Freddy.
And I'm Tiffany.
In this 13th episode, we're going to talk narratives. And mainly, we want to explore, is college even worth it in 2024? So before we get started, let me turn it over to Tiffany so she can do some housekeeping.
Hey, once again, I want to thank you for listening, liking, following, commenting, all of that, all of the different platforms that we have available. Please continue to do that work. If you haven't noticed, we have a logo now. We love our logo. Let us know what you think. We're planning on putting it on t-shirts and hats and things like that. So please let us know what you think of it. We like it a lot. We're very excited about it. And I wanted to shout out Stephanie from Southern California, who is a colleague of mine, and she has listened to all of our episodes. So we're really excited about that. It makes us feel good. And she gave a nice shout out compliment to Freddy for his very relaxing voice. That just takes you, down at the end of the day. I feel that way when I first spoke to him on the phone. That was something that caught my ear. So I totally agree with her. But continue to share with your friends, like, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff to our podcast on all the different platforms. We really appreciate you.
And so as we get started, I wanted us to actually discuss our educational journeys because that has informed a lot of our opinions. And I'd like to really give the audience an idea of what our biases may be right off the bat. And so, Tiffany, do you want to talk about your education journey?
Sure. I mean, when I started out, I never really even thought about going to college. Like the big deal, I'm 54. So the big deal was like graduate high school, and I was glad I accomplished that. When it came to school, I first started out going to FITM, the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandise. I worked at a store that's no longer around called Contempo, and I worked in the store, and I wanted to be, I couldn't decide. Do I want to be a designer? Do I want to, be the one to choose the clothes to go into the store? Or do I want to be more behind the scenes and do the financial part of it? I kept changing my major. And after a few months at FITM, I took a leave of absence because I got a job at the main office of Contempo Casuals, and I ended up moving up in that position and never went back. And then some years later, I think I was in that career for a good 6-8 years, something like that. And I decided I wanted to be in the field of education, which I always had a little bit of an interest in because in high school, I worked in a childcare center and I enjoyed it. So I wanted my own childcare center to begin with. And I knew I needed to go to school, or at least I thought I did, to get that done. So that's what I did. I went back to school, left the fashion industry, went back to school. It took me some years to get there, but I finally graduated with a BA, and I thought, okay, I have a BA, and now I need to get my credential because I turned from wanting to have a center, a childcare center, to just, being a teacher. And I could explain that probably in another episode how that came about, but it was mostly because of money, to be honest with you, and the difficulty I thought it would be in owning your own childcare center. So I got my my BA, and I knew that I needed to get a credential. So I went and got the credential. And then upon working in the field, I realized that in order to get further up on the scale, that I needed to get my master's. So I went back and I got a master's degree, something I never thought I would do. Today, a master's degree seems like the basic thing that you do, but back then it was like, a master's, and a PhD was way out of pocket, and at least in my circle that I was in. Not a lot of my friends back at that time went to school. Some people went later, but not everybody was talking about it in the way that people do now and in certain cultures and communities. I was really proud of myself for going to get a master's. I was a full-blown adult. By the time I got my BA, I was 29. And I think I got my master's by the time I was 32 or so. And it was a big deal to me that I did that I went through and got something that was a really big deal in my family. No one else in my family had completed college. Some people had gone here and there for a short period of time, but I felt like that was a really big deal. And I'm glad that I did it.
But real quick,
Yes.
how did you fund that?
Well, even going back to FITM, my mom took out a loan and I took out a loan. And even though I only went to fashion school for 3 months, she had to pay for an entire year.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, Mom. And then when I went to get my BA, I took out loans. I took out excessive amounts of loans. I was living at home. There was no reason for me to do that. But I was like, ooh, money. And I'm going to have money. And so I'm still paying to this day, which is my fault too. Like there's been, times where I put it on hold and I just don't make that a priority to pay that off. But it's expensive, like going to school. And that it was expensive back then. I mean, the books alone were just, astronomical. So I know now it's even harder and more so for people to fund going to school. And I thought that, for a long time, and I'm a teacher, right? So I would push college. I would name my reading groups after different colleges. And, we as a school, we pushed college, and we had a time where we would wear our college t-shirt or sweatshirts on certain days to promote that to kids. And I still believe in that to a certain extent, but I also realize that today it's not necessary to go to college, and you can still have a really great career, make a lot of money. A lot of my friends who didn't go to college make a lot more than me. And some of you may be saying, well, you're a teacher. Of course not, right? We hear how little teachers make, but it really depends what district you're in. I mean, we're never probably going to make what we're worth, but we've got people who've been teaching as long as I have, which this is my 30th year, with the same degree that I have, and they're making like $50,000, $60,000 a year. And I'm not. I mean, my district pays over $100,000, which, I'm in California, and that goes only but so far, but that's still a lot of money compared to how much teachers are making around the country with much more difficult situations.
Yes.
Right. So I understand to be a teacher, you're going to need to have a degree, especially in public school.
Yeah.
In private school, they don't require as much.
Mm-hmm.
Some private schools, right? If you're more elite private school, you would, but you don't need as, the requirements are not the same.
Right.
However, I still would say to my students, it really depends what you want to be. And I'm trying to show them now there's so many more careers out there than what we were exposed to. I mean, even now, kids will be like doctor, lawyer, vet, and nothing's wrong with any of those careers, police officer, nothing's wrong with any of those careers. And, going to college, nothing wrong with that. But they have no idea. I don't. I'm still learning about positions that I'm like, that's an actual job, and you make what? And you work from home, and you have freedom. Like, I think we need to be educating people beyond the mindset of going to college and working for 30 years for another company and then retiring. I mean, there's so much more out there that we can do today in 2024 than we could back when I was going to school.
Mm-hmm.
And so while, like I said, if you want to be a doctor, obviously you need to go to college, which doesn't mean you're going to make a ton of money, right? Again, that also depends where you live. All doctors don't make the same thing, but it's obviously important to go to school, at least to get the beginning education, right, up to 12th grade. And depending on where you went, how great of an education you get. I think it's important to take some courses here and there that support what you want to do.
Yes.
But you may not have to get an entire degree. It really depends. So I really would suggest that people explore other options, because that's not necessarily what we all need to do in today's day and age.
Yeah.
How about you? What was your story on that?
Yeah. So my story is, I was not a good high school student. I didn't go to school that much. I tried to get out of going to school as much as possible. I didn't enjoy school. I was lucky that I always scored high on tests, but I didn't believe in doing homework and projects and things of that nature. And so I've talked about in previous podcasts that I was pushed to go into the military after I left high school. And I still, to this day, say the Army saved my life. And I'm still a big advocate of military service. And so while I was in the military, you have your schools that you go to learn your specialty and everything. And I did well at that. But a lot of it is getting out there and showing what you can do in your chosen job. And what I would always come up against And I did this also outside of the military, which is why I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder for a lot of years. I would come up against people who said, well, I studied this in college, and as if that somehow made them better at it than I was. And so I would always say, well, while you spent 4 years studying it, I spent 4 years doing it. And so I always had this chip on my shoulder, and getting out of the military and getting into telecom, I always felt like I had to prove to the world that even though I didn't go to college, that I could be more proficient in my field than people that did. And it was also a big deal for me because I was the first person in my family not to go to college. Both of my parents have college degrees. My older sister went to college and has a degree. My younger sister went to college, and I did not. So I got a lot of heat from my parents, especially my father, for not only not going to college, but not going to Morehouse, because that's where he went to school. And I always felt like I had something to prove. And he would say, well, there's things that you're not going to be able to do without a degree. And I'd say, what are those things? And I would seek those things. So when I was in telecom, I started off as a technician. I was a pole climber. I ran fiber. I did all those different types of things. But he said, well, you'll never become an engineer without a degree. And so that was my next goal, was to become an engineer. And not only did I become an engineer, I became a manager over engineers. And so I kept saying, okay, now what? And so it was a big chip on my shoulder. And for a long time, I was really against college. And not that I felt that college was ever bad, but like I said, I had a chip on my shoulder. And so it was more of an emotional reaction than a pragmatic one. But as I've gotten older, I see of course, the value of college when it comes to certain vocations. I still think it's a bad idea in a lot of vocations. I think in a lot of your technology, I think that college really gives you more of a history lesson than it teaches you technology. Because like for me, I'm in cybersecurity. By the time they come up with the curriculum and it's approved and they start to document it, that technology is already long outdated. And so to teach someone something like cybersecurity, a lot of the things in IT, a lot of the things having to do with AI and machine learning, it seems like the best way to learn that is finding an internship or an entry-level job, even if it's in the mailroom, where you can get around people in that industry and just learn, just listen and learn and figure things out. To me, it just seems like that's a better way to go.
Something you said, I want to touch on this. There's an idea, and I understand that on a basic level, this makes sense, that if somebody went to school, they're going to know more than someone else about something, right? But that's not necessarily true, right? So I know that in our field of teaching, right, a lot of us got the same, degrees and certification, be it different schools. I do think the school you go to does actually make a difference, but it's in some cases. But a lot of times you can't tell that just, we both went to school, because there's other teachers who are not as effective. They're not as creative. They don't have that talent in that particular area. So all of those things matter as well. This idea that you could just go to school because you're good in school and good in the books, that you're going to be good in that profession as well. Yes. So I think we really need to consider the fact that some people, a lot of the times, actually, the people that we study, that we consider heroes, or we look to look at their careers and things like that, they didn't go to school, or they didn't finish school, or they had a hard time in school, right? Einstein, right? People were saying that he was dumb and this and that, right? So this idea that if you go to school, you have this certain intelligence, and if you don't, is false. Would you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And the one thing that college can't teach you, and the one thing that an SAT can't measure, is curiosity. And I think, to me, curiosity is the largest measurement, if it could be measured, but the largest metric for success than anything else, than even intelligence. If you have a level of curiosity and you're willing to work towards learning more and being better at your chosen field, then I think that you're going to excel. Alternatively, for people who lose curiosity, people get into their field and they've been in there for a long span of time and they lose that curiosity, they do tend to become irrelevant. And I would say that in just about any field, like I would imagine with teaching, the strategies have changed over the years. And so you've been teaching for 30 years now. How do you feel like the level of curiosity has helped propel you in terms of your ability to reach out to kids?
I mean, it's been crucial, right? I actually struggle with just following a curriculum, some curriculum telling me how to handle the people before me without me using my own thought process about what works in the community I'm serving and the emotions of the child and all of these different things. Definitely being curious and going out there and reading different type of programs or ideologies that work with kids, and not just turning the pages of a book, or even not just listening to the PDs you're getting at work, right? Going out there and doing your own investigation and trying out different things to see what works and to make decisions that sometimes go against the grain. I think that's really important. And so if you're not that type of person,
right,
it doesn't matter what degree you have.
It doesn't.
You're not going to have the same impact as someone, like you said, who's curious. And I find that interesting. A few years ago, I had a student who's now in 5th grade. In class, we were making a list of what they were expecting from me, which they should expect from a teacher, and what they should expect from each other as students. And one of the students, who is extremely, gifted, she said, I would ask that all my classmates be curious.
Yes.
And so this was a 7-year-old at the time saying that. And then it does make a difference when you're asking questions and you wonder, and all of these things are so important. If you just sit there in a classroom and you just take in everything that's being given to you without questioning it or anything, I mean, you've got this piece of paper, a degree at the end, but what kind of education did you have? So I think even sitting in a classroom, the education varies greatly between students, because it depends on how curious you are. And probably a lot of the people that we, aspire and look up to who didn't stay in college, they were very curious. Yeah. And then once they started their own little company, they ran with it and put the 10,000 plus hours into it. And hello, Bill Gates.
Yeah. And those people are still curious. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, in my late 30s, I was in government at the time, at Department of Defense, and I decided, well, let me try this whole college thing and see what happens. And so I went to the University of Maryland's online courses and said, I want to try and work on a degree in cybersecurity, even though that's what I'd been doing all these years. But I was like, okay, well, let's see how hard it will be to get a degree. And what I was advised to do was start with the 400 courses and work my way back to the 100 courses, because I'd already been doing this for a long time. And I had very little interest in, the little math and science and reading course, all those different types of things. And so I started off with the 400 courses. Not only did they not challenge me, but they were, like I said before, they were a history lesson. And so what they had us doing was researching threats, cybersecurity events that had happened a few years ago. Well, I had already known about those things, but even if I hadn't, the lessons learned from those experiences, from those cybersecurity events, were so outdated that it doesn't really help me right now. Mm-hmm. And so I went through and I did the 400 level courses and I did the 300 level courses. And then I kind of fell off. I was like, this is just, I didn't feel like I was getting anything out of it. because I was already in the field. And like I said, by the time they come up with a curriculum on some of this stuff, it's already outdated. And I've also heard this from people who I know that are doctors, who are saying the stuff that they learned in medical school they can't use now,
Right.
because the information is constantly updating. And so curiosity is really, I just think that's the game changer. That's the cheat code, is having curiosity. So even if you don't have the education, even if you're not the most intellectual person in the world, if you have an extreme amount of curiosity, I think that in whatever field you go into, you can excel.
I agree. I think in speaking for college, some of the things that you can get from college is discipline. You could learn to be more disciplined. Not saying you can't be a disciplined person without it, but it kind of forces you to be disciplined, because there's all these deadlines, especially when you get straight out of high school, I think, right? Like I went back later in life, so I had already experienced life and disciplined myself or whatever because I was older. But when you're younger, it can help with discipline. It could help create networks depending how involved you get in school. Like I didn't get that experience because, one, I went to a little bit later in life to school. Two, I was going at night after working. So everyone was in that same position. They had families and full-time jobs. Were like, get in, get out. So we didn't get a chance to really network. But I think in cases where you're younger and you maybe live on campus, and that there's a benefit to that. Not saying people can't create that same thing outside of school, but it gives you a place to be able to do that. And I think it depends on the person too, right? You were around like highly educated people. You know, your parents forced you to read and do all these things when you're younger. Your mom was a teacher. You got a lot of knowledge that school would not have even taught you.
Absolutely.
So, and that's the other thing. A lot of times, you know, college, there's a lot of areas that are blind in college that they don't give you. They don't really prepare you for. You know, if you go to something very specialized, great. But, you know, especially when you get your BA, that kind of general information, there's a lot of things there. And especially because the curriculum is already set, what we're going to talk about, what we think is important, who we think the greats are, all of that. Your education could kind of be limited if you only rely on college for it.
Yeah.
So
but one thing real quick that I have to push back on is where you said, you were getting discipline from college, or people can get discipline from college. I have to push back on that, and mainly because I heard that a lot from being in the military. People would say, well, the military will discipline you. No, it won't. It really won't. People who went in the Army, people who I was in basic training with, who were knuckleheads, they left the Army as knuckleheads. The difference with me was that I knew I needed to change. And so the Army put me in an environment where I could change, because I didn't know anybody there. And so I could start over and reset my reputation. And it kind of put me in a predicament where I could change. And I suspect that college is kind of the same way, where if you want to change, it's a good environment to do so.
True. But
the environment itself doesn't make you change.
Right. It does give some sense of structure if you are from a situation that doesn't have structure.
Yeah.
You know, it could give a sense of structure. However, you know, you can get that from so many places, right? Like,
and if you don't want the structure, you're not going to get it.
Exactly. Exactly. And they from what my understanding is, it's a lot harder to get into school today than it was before, even though you're still coming out, you know, with this master's degree, owing $70,000 and having to take an entry-level position, or maybe risk not even being able to find a job in the first place.
Yes.
The whole thing about working from, you know, 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, like that you have to do that for 30 plus years. It's just not true. I know so many people who are working a lot less hours, making a lot more money, and just having more freedom with their life and flexibility, and able to make enough money to invest to make that money grow, as opposed to living from paycheck to paycheck. So I do see, and I'm not saying college can't do that for you as well, but I think a lot of that might be the connections, like who you know, what job you go into, all of those things. And again, I know some people are probably thinking, well, I left college with no debt, right? Because there's a groups of people who their parents pay for it, and that's awesome.
Yes.
Right. But those people still end up like, I work with people who had no debt because their parents pay for it, but we're still at the same school doing the same thing it's not like they had some greater,
But not only that, but what did you spend that 4 years doing? Did you spend that 4 years just doing papers and turning in papers? Or did you spend that 4 years actually trying to learn and trying to get something out of it? That's one of the things like in technology, that's why I recommend for a lot of people in technology not to go to college, to go to an internship, even if it's an unpaid internship, find that entry level position, which I know is not easy. But once you do that and you get in the door and you meet a network of people and you start to see what the job actually is, right, and your curiosity can really take you far. So you figured that starting as an intern out of high school, if you can get into those positions, I'm not going to pretend like they're easy, but if you can get that internship right out of high school, after the 4 years you would have been in college, you could be permanently employed and really on your way to an awesome career. Whereas where some people in college just go to college and that's it. Now, I do recommend that if you're in technology and you do decide to go to college, you should still be pursuing internships. You can do it in the summertime or whenever you have the availability, because you do need to learn that network. You do need to figure out what the job actually is as opposed to what the professor taught. And, one of the things that also kind of gave me a different thought process on these degrees was that when I was in school, or when I took those courses at Maryland, was a lot of the professors weren't really in the field. They were professors.
Right.
And so they're going off of what they read. And so it didn't seem like a lot of them had the knowledge that could really teach people what they needed to know. And I've talked to other people who I know who've gone to business school, and they told me the same thing. A lot of times your professor in business school doesn't have his own business, and it's like, and you're teaching me what?
Right.
So it's those types of things.
Right. I think for me, in my position, a teacher, we have to do student teaching. So I guess that would be sort of our, internship, so to speak. And I think it was extremely valuable to be able to do that.
Yeah, I'm sorry to kind of interrupt here, but I had a question for you, Tiffany. I wanted to find out from you what your thought process is on gap years. And the reason why I asked that is because you initially out of high school wanted to go to school for fashion, and then you kind of pivoted over to education. Mm-hmm. Do you think that basically having that period of time where you can figure some things out and see other careers helped you, or what do you think about that?
I think it helped me tremendously. I think it would help the average student. I first of all feel that it would be probably pretty wise to go to a junior college to get some of the courses out of the way. I mean, why spend all of that money?
Yes.
You don't have to. At the end of the day, you transfer and your degree is going to say whatever school you graduated from. So that's one thing. Another thing is, how many 18-year-olds know exactly what they're going to do? There's so many people out there going to school for something straight out of high school, and they don't even end up in that career, right? I mean, that happens very often.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of studies out there. They've been doing these studies forever, but the last one that I saw, about 50% of college graduates are not working in the industry where their degree was.
And probably for various reasons. One, they didn't want to go into that in the first place, or they couldn't find a job in that area. But I think it's important to give a break, even if it's just a year off. I understand parents are like, I want you to finish. They're afraid that if they don't go immediately, they won't go at all. But taking that break can be very valuable during that time. Being curious and finding like what kind of jobs are out there, because typically if you're 18, unless you have a home life where your family is providing that level of education about the different things that you could do in life.
Right.
School is not doing that, right? High school is not telling you about all these. I mean, there are so many jobs out there,
Yes.
and you do not have to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week to make a good living. I'm not saying everyone is going to get that perfect job that you have, Frederick, but it's a possibility, and you don't know until you know. So if anything, if I were going to have my child take some time off, that's the time to explore. What do you really want to do? Maybe have them travel. Maybe, just don't just jump right back in.
Yes.
So quickly, that mindset that you have to go, and if you don't, your life is over and there's no other chance for you, that simply is not true.
Yes.
And I don't think that is a good measure of how intelligent you are.
No.
Just because you went straight to college out of high school and you went 4 years and your parents paid $70,000 for it or whatever. I don't think that that's something to just automatically push on anyone or be proud of. You need to really think about these traditions and what would be best for you. And you don't know unless you explore and you question. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with going straight to college. Just, I think a lot of times the students kind of get lost there. They start to question themselves, which is a part of life. That's part of growing up. But I think allowing them to have that space to think about other things that they want to do. Because as adults, a lot of us are like, I want a job where I can stay at home, or I have the freedom, or I don't have to be sitting in meetings all day.
Yeah.
Like we're looking for those jobs that give us more quality of life. So why aren't we giving our child at the start of their adult life giving them that same grace? Why make them go through 25 years of a job they really don't want and they can't really maybe meet their potential, because that's what tradition says that we do.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you said we could probably discuss a little bit more as we start to bring this to a close had to do with just tradition. In some families, there's a tradition where everyone goes to college and you must go to college. And breaking with that tradition is going to risk hurting a lot of relationships in the family. You also have some people who would be the first one in their family to go to college. And so there's that pressure for that. Mm-hmm. And having the forethought to assess and say, is this even for me? I realize that because my grades are high, that my family wants me to do this, or my SAT scores, whatever the case may be, that everyone is saying that I should go to college, but maybe not. And having that courage to sometimes tell your family, I'm sorry, that's just not what I'm willing to do. But the other thing that we need to talk about is, even if you don't go to college, it doesn't mean that you don't need to work hard in high school. Uh-huh. And that's one of the things that I see a lot of people going through. Well, my child wants to become a plumber or an electrician. Well, that's hard work. You still need discipline. You still need to be able to get up early in the morning. You still need to be able to see a task all the way through. You still need that curiosity. Whether you go to college or not, there's no good job out there where you're not going to have to start off putting in some time and working hard, and where curiosity is not going to help you.
Right. Right. You still need to learn to read and write and manage your money. So at least get those basics in. You're there for 13 years, of your life. You might as well get as much out of it as you can. And I don't know how many young people are listening to this, but maybe people who have children who are, either nearing the college age or just thinking about how you're raising them. I mean, the amount of stress on kids of what they have to do to get into college, and just because your child is doing it doesn't mean that that's not impacting their health and their mindset and how they're going to parent and what they're going to do. Just that hustle, always on the move mentality. I mean, you know, that's for some people, but pushing that on your child automatically.
Yeah, at 18 years old, that's a lot of
at
pressure
11
to throw on.
And 12, my goodness, like they're doing 50,000 things, and to think that that's, you know, that's what life is supposed to be. Might be why we have a society that we have today.
Absolutely.
With mental illness and suicide and all of these things up. Yeah, we have more people in college than ever, but we also have more problems than we've had in a long time. So we need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and so as we close, we will talk more about college and everything that goes along with that in future episodes. But we wanted to stop here before we go on for another 2 hours or so. But I really appreciate everyone who has been listening to us from the beginning, and even those who just are listening to us for the first time, welcome. We really appreciate you being here, and we would love to hear your feedback, your comments, all of that type of stuff, be it on our social media or through the podcast platforms that you go through. You can leave comments as well. We also encourage, of course, if we're bringing value to your days, to give us a like and share and subscribe and follow. Did I hit them all?
I think you hit them all.
Okay.
And I wanted to throw a little, before we end, a little appreciation at Freddy, because we record this like in our bedroom, right? And it's hot as, I don't know, it's the hottest room in the condo. We have to turn the air off because it'll make too much noise. With, you know, sweat is pouring down my back. You know, Freddy is the one who does all the editing and everything, and he gets the excerpts, and he's doing amazing at that. He's editing out the coughs and the people outside and the knock on the door and all of these things. So if you listen this far to the end, you know, please give a little clap for him wherever you are, because he's putting in a lot of work to make this happen every week.
Yeah, and a lot of the work is because we both use a lot of fillers, a lot of and ands and stuff like that. And so, but we are working to get better at
Yes, absolutely.
So thank you again for listening and supporting. And I'm Freddy.
And I'm Tiffany.
And we're out of here.
All right. See you next week.
Take care.